with the sense of hope that we get when people are able to make a difference in their own lives, this little country can keep the promise of all those who have come to its shores for a brighter future. A government that spends carefully, that cuts red tape and regulation, that tries to push people up instead of pulling them down, as we saw so often from the opposition. Sound bites and slogans don't create jobs. It's that simple. Over here in the real practical world, we have policies that are designed to get New Zealand working.
We're making it easier to employ people, to build, to invest, and to live your own life on your own terms. And as other parties reluctantly shift towards ACT's long-held positions on regulation, education, firearms, my message to them is simple. This is just the beginning.
If you gave your party vote to ACT in 2023, the savings of ACT's ministers and policies on your behalf is $57,000 per vote.
I thank all those Kiwis who get up each day and keep going, thinking, dreaming, producing and employing. You are the economy and we work for you.
It is easier and more affordable to build a home, and that means the next generation has ladders of opportunity to be part of a property-owning democracy. I'm proud to say that our party is making an enormous contribution to saving for the next generation. What it means to be a Kiwi is to have ambition, to be adventurous, to be a pioneer, to believe that life isn't like bad weather. We can change it through our actions and our choices, that we can choose a brighter future, we can fix the things that matter and find ourselves in the greatest little country on earth.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to ACT's State of the Nation 2026. It is really, really awesome to see so many people here giving up their time to care about your country. And it's wonderful to see people coming in online as well, people who couldn't make it down to here to Christchurch. But what a pleasure it is to be in Christchurch, as Laura said, in our mainland. And I love getting out of Wellington, firstly, but coming around to where real people exist, people who want to back our country and back ACT. And now even just this morning, I've had the real pleasure of meeting some people here who've been supporters for many, many years. And I've also had the pleasure of saying good morning to people who are at their very first ACT event. And so no matter where you are in your journey, of supporting ACT or wanting to know more, you're always welcome here. And so thank you very much for coming along and giving up your time to care about our country and what ACT's vision is for our future. Now, over the last decade, I've been involved with ACT from very first days, being a volunteer, putting out those leaflets, and then working with David Seymour to help progress dignity for people's lives through the End of Life Choice Act. Then being part of the opposition, standing up for people who didn't feel like they had a voice at that time. And now I sit around the cabinet table. And I've got to tell you, through all of that time, my belief that ACT is vital for our country's future has only grown. It has strengthened and it has solidified. And we can't stop here. We have to keep going if we want the next generation to have even better than what we have now and what our parents and grandparents have. And I believe that we can have a positive future. We just have to fight for it and be part of it. So if you are starting out in your journey, and you might be a volunteer here today, you don't know. You could end up being the deputy leader of ACT one day. But join us in your journey. come along, deliver those leaflets, be here for our campaign for 2026 to grow ACT, to have a greater government than the one we've even got now, and be there for the future and for the next generation of children coming through. Now, in that decade of being part of ACT, I've gotten to know one particular person pretty well, and that is David Seymour. And I will also tell you that through that whole decade, I know that this is a principled man. He says what he believes, and quite often he is voicing the opinions of people who feel too afraid to say their own opinions out loud. But it is a popular opinion, and I'm so proud that we currently have a Deputy Prime Minister from the ACT Party who is a principled man, who does have strong opinions, and in particular the belief that everybody should be equal before the law, and is able to take a stand, not for a great soundbite, but because it's right. And so please join me in welcoming our friend here in ACT, our current Deputy Prime Minister, and our ACT leader, David Seymour. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. A statistic for you, you may not be aware that 50% of the qualified economists in Parliament are Brooke Van Velden. 100% of them are in the ACT caucus. Andrew Hoggard couldn't be with us today, but just imagine if more than 2 out of 123 MPs in Parliament had studied economics. We could be balancing the budget in no time. That's why we need more ACT MPs, amongst many other reasons. So thank you, Brooke, and thank you to most of the ACT caucus who are here in Christchurch today, particularly Laura, who you saw earlier, a Christchurch native who is hosting us here today. And to everybody who bought a ticket to the State of the Nation on Valentine's weekend, thank you. To my partner Alex, you being here must be a sign of true love. Like most of us, though, I also love this country. And I want staying here to be the obvious choice for each generation. I don't want staying to be something they have to weigh up against better wages and better opportunity overseas. And we've got to be honest with each other. At the moment, they're not just weighing it up. The scales have tipped hard against staying, and the outward migration numbers are a flashing light on the dashboard of New Zealand. Here's the good news. We can choose to fix it. Our country is small enough, we care enough, and we're resourceful enough to choose a different path. But by choosing, I mean really tackling what needs to be done. I mean making the tough but unpopular decisions that New Zealand needs to remain a first world nation. And to me, choosing starts with listening. It means hearing, really hearing what New Zealanders are concerned about and what they aspire to. And today I'm going to talk about what I've heard and the hard choices that we need to turn down those lights on the dashboard before we extinguish them completely. But I also listen to another group of New Zealanders. I listen to other politicians, and I see them amplifying the dark underbelly of New Zealand's otherwise beautiful culture. That dark underbelly is the tall poppy chopping approach that has held us back for generations. And so much of what our opponents say can be summed up like this. Your problems are caused by other people's success. But if you vote for us, we'll pull them down a peg or two and give you their money. If you were to put everything Chloe Swarbrick has ever said into ChatGPT and ask for a summary, that's what it would say. Luckily, we don't need that because we have real intelligence. And then I listen to Chris Hipkins and I hear Jacinda Light, a lilting voice that says all the right things, promises nirvana, but never says how we'll pay for it or tackle the key issues. he reminds me of what I imagine an anaesthetist would sound like just before he gives you the injection to knock you out and make you forget about the pain. And then I listen to the Greens and I wake up quickly because they used to speak for the environment, but increasingly they channel the young generation's fear and frustrations, which are legitimate, by blaming others' success and even bleeding into disgusting and unforgivable anti-Semitism. And then I listen to Te Pāti Māori, and their words, they sort of frighten me, but they also bewilder me. If they want to be living as Māori, well, that's ka pai. Despite what they say, I'll be the first to support their choice because my only real belief is in freedom. And if they want everyone to live in a Māori society, with themselves as tangata whenua sitting atop a hierarchy of identity, that's where we part company. It's not about having the choice to live as you would like. We support that. It's their agenda of forcing everyone to live as they would like, in some sort of hierarchy of settlement order that we oppose. And it's not just bad for New Zealand, it's bad for the followers of Te Pāti Māori. Because anyone, any time in history, who's grown up and been brought up to believe that they were born special is destined to failure. Exhibit A, Prince Andrew syndrome. And when I listen to Te Pāti Māori as a potential next government, along with Chris Hipkins, the anaesthetist, and Chloe Swarbrick, the drag-down merchant, it frightens me like it should frighten a lot of New Zealanders. We cannot make the same mistake again as a country. And it starts by taking their platitudes and half-truths at face value. Actually listen to them. Listen to what they're saying, to the nonsense, the self-interest, the incited division, and the politics of raw envy. We say enough of that. Do not let them near power ever again. Because if I had $1 for every person who told me, if Labour get back in, I'm getting out of New Zealand, ACT's fundraising would be done for the year. Now, just as a point of fact, those people don't actually give me $1, so if you're thinking about making a donation with a QR code on your table, it's still a live thing. But a lot of people are saying they'll be gone if they get in. Our first mission, therefore, is to keep Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori out of power. But today's about more than just that. Today is a gathering for thoughtful people, inside, not outside, of course. We've spent the last 2 years as a party proving that we're up to the job of fixing what matters. I believe, I don't claim that everything is perfect, but I do claim we've earned our stripes by proving we can work with others while driving real change around the cabinet table. We've had cost pressures that have affected every firm, every farm and every family. And that's why saving money has been our first and most urgent task. The ACT Party can point to an outsized role in making the savings that New Zealand needs. When we say fixing what matters, I look at something like school lunches alone, where we've saved over $300 million, but the number that students actually send back each day hasn't changed. And you think about that. If the Labour Party had adopted my approach to school lunches, they could have got the same quality for $800 million worth less debt. Now you think about that. Everyone says, think of the children, think about the welfare of the children. If you really care about the children, you don't borrow $800 million and say, here's your lunch, kids, enjoy paying for it for the rest of your life. You actually drive efficiency to do it for just about half the price and get the same quality. And in fact, if every single MP had done what I've done with that one policy, we would just about be back in surplus. That's the difference. We've also knocked $200 million off the cost of a Waikato medical school. We knocked nearly as much off the electric car charging network. Sometimes our partners in government have big ideas, and we make them affordable big ideas. Brooke has saved the taxpayer $12 billion by focusing on the pay equity legislation and getting it back to actual gender discrimination. Now, we calculate that if you gave your party vote to ACT last time, then you have saved the taxpayer $57,000. And here's my proposition. If enough people vote ACT this year, we could be back in surplus by Christmas. $57,000 each, it's got to be a good deal for the taxpayer. In fact, if you don't give your party vote to ACT, you're throwing money away. But we're not just making the government smaller, we're also making it more effective. And again, I make the point that ACT has shown that we can be competent managers who get results in government. There are now more children going to school because we've retooled the whole approach to school attendance and said there's no longer excuses. A growing number of children, including in this city, are going to charter schools. These schools show disillusioned kids that education can be different. And when they go, they're learning a history curriculum that gives a balanced and inclusive view of our country and the rest of the world, instead of casting children as victims and villains in a play written long before they were born. At MedSafe, new medicines are being consented twice as fast. And since I've been Pharmac Minister, the organisation has been transformed. Desperate people who used to picket outside Pharmac are now working constructively inside the tent to make better decisions for all patients. And for that, I must thank Todd Stevenson for his work as the Parliamentary Private Secretary to Pharmac. The courts are hearing cases 20% faster under Nicole McKee. Commit a crime, Nicole will ensure you don't have to wait as long. Overseas investments used to be consented in 78 days. So far, I've got it down to 21 days to get money into the country, and we've got a new goal of getting it down to 5 working days. Brooks issuing passports through the Department of Internal Affairs at record time. People are getting them on the normal time frame faster than the express time frame. The fire service is taking $60 million from the back office to the front line under her leadership. Meanwhile, you go to Oranga Tamariki facilities and you'll notice that assaults and violence in the facilities has dropped 14%, but Karen has got KFC on the roof incidents down 100% to 0. She just told them, kids, there's no KFC on the roof. And they listen, because even naughty kids can tell when an adult cares, which Karen does. And that, for me, makes her a great New Zealander. We've also seen ram raids down 85%, youth crime down 15%, violent crime down across the board. Remember when gangs were sort of treated as a stakeholder, a pillar of the community? Well, now they're barely seen or heard, except when they're counting their 3 strikes if they offend. And meanwhile, Andrew Hoggard is running a one-man defence force, keeping out biosecurity threats from wasps to weevils that would otherwise decimate our economy. All the things I've just talked about are things that ACT ministers have been leading or deeply involved in. If I was to go on about everything the government's done, it would take longer, but not that much, because it's ACT ministers who have been driving the change competently through government. But it's not just the government taxing money and spending it on services that matter. It's all the tentacles of rules that it puts out into our lives, taking up our time and taking out our money. And I'm proud that our government is driving the deregulation agenda, because time and again, we're being proven right after a long, hard fight. I voted alone against the Zero Carbon Act and the earthquake strengthening laws and the Arms Act changes of 2019 and 2020. And in each case, our party was pilloried for standing apart from the crowd. And in each case, New Zealanders, and now the government, have realised we're right and come to our position. The crippling methane reduction targets are being halved so farmers can keep on farming. And I think our friend and MP, Mark Cameron, can take an enormous amount of credit for scaring the entire political spectrum into actually making that change. The earthquake strengthening laws are being scaled back to target real danger, so that most buildings can continue to be used without financially crippling rebuilds. And Nicole McKee is legislating a brand new Arms Act to keep all of us safe while treating legitimate firearm users with respect. And here's something else. We've legalised looking for oil and gas. Imagine if we're able to look for the wealth beneath us. The war on landlords The white flag has been raised. In fact, there's been some restoration of fairness. In tenancy law and mortgage interest deductibility, what we've seen is by making it more attractive to be a landlord, along with falling mortgage rates, rents have actually steadied or even fallen after years of tenant crippling rises. We've seen 1,700 pet bonds lodged, so far a genuine win-win for those with pets who want to rent, and critically, for those fleeing domestic violence. These are the kinds of changes that we've been able to make, and the ones that are just the ones that I thought to write out in writing this speech. I should also mention the Holidays Act. It's so broken, if you run a small business, that even government departments couldn't pay people the right amount with all their resources. If you do run a small business, it's a nightmare. And successive ministers, when Brooke got the job, they said, yeah, good luck with that, because they had given up trying to fix it. But there's a new sheriff in town, and Brooke is fixing the Holidays Act even as she fixes unfair employment laws and restores common sense to health and safety by focusing it on critical risks. And then there's Simon Court, Parliament's only civil engineer. By the way, 50% of the civil engineers in Parliament are Simon Court, and 100% are in the ACT party. The number of consents will halve thanks to him putting the simple property right principle into resource management law. If it's not affecting your neighbours, you don't need consent to do it. How sensible is that? The benefits are projected at $3 billion a year. And that's before we talk about the Ministry of Regulation making it easier to do everything from baking a cake to building a garden shed, running a daycare, a hairdresser, even growing hemp or licensing agricultural and veterinary products have been made easier by this small ministry, unlocking hundreds of millions of dollars of economic value in its first 2 years and reducing the stress and wasted time for 600,000 small business owners. They've also passed the Regulatory Standards Bill that for the first time in our country's history, we will have property rights in law. Now, there's only 2 Western democracies which don't have property rights in their law, Canada and New Zealand. Well, sorry, Canada, you're on your own. Hopefully they will follow suit. I haven't yet mentioned the Treaty Principles Bill. You know, we may have lost the vote, but we won the debate because Kiwis agree with the principles, and they agree with the principles because it's a fact. New Zealanders actually are equal. And just like euthanasia, homosexual law reform bills, the first vote won't be the final say. Both those laws took 3 attempts to pass. Meanwhile, we got rid of the Māori Health Authority, the co-governed 3 waters, we got every voter a say on Māori wards, and the government has an official policy of delivering services on need, not race, thanks to ACT in government. In other words, common sense is winning, and it's people like this in this room who have given their vote, their time, their money, their advocacy and their networks to make it happen. If you believe in the values and the achievements I've just talked about, then you should be celebrating and taking a bow for the achievements that you've made, because we couldn't have done it without you. I'm proud that ACT's MPs in government are saving taxpayer money, making services more efficient, cutting red tape and restoring equal rights for all citizens. We've delivered half the inflation, half the interest rates, and a return of hope to the New Zealand economy. But the answer to the kids in the back of the seat of this journey is that we freely admit we're not there yet. We have proven something that was unknown 2 years ago, but we're not there yet. What we've proven is that ACT can be collegial in a coalition government, and that we can be effective in driving the change our countries need. Unfortunately, that was the good news part of the speech. Now here's the other part. New Zealand is a great country, no question. We are heading roughly in the right direction, no question. But we're not putting out those flashing lights on the dashboard nearly fast enough. Keeping the socialists out of power, just keeping them out of the hotel at this point, is critical to the country surviving. There's no question about that. But if we want the next generation to stay, then we must meet the first world expectations of people who've grown up here. And that means telling it like it is and taking on the hard issues. And I believe that there are 5 warning lights on the dashboard of the good ship New Zealand that we must turn down and turn out to succeed. The cost of living crisis, as it's called, I would call it something slightly different. It is a productivity slump. It's not just that inflation has driven up costs, although I'm sure everybody can see that it's done that. It's that wages have not kept up with inflation. Real economic growth after inflation has actually gone backwards over the last 5 years. And people feel a real sense of despair about that. Because for decades, for generations, we've expected things to get better. Actually, for about 2 centuries. Things got better as we worked for it each year. And now, for the first time in years and years and years, people work their guts out only to find that they're further behind. And it's no wonder that people are getting jaded and angry in that environment. That is a fundamental driver of the mood in New Zealand today. So that cost of living and productivity issue is the first light on the dashboard that we must take on. But a second and related problem is that the government is not balancing its books. The Treasury forecast it will spend 14 billion more than it takes in this year. Now, if you count the ACC blowout, which some say we should, the figure is 17 billion of deficit. If there are no nasty surprises for the next 5 years, we're on track as a government to post a small surplus by 2030. But after that, our ageing population will put us back in the red for more decades of deficit spending, where the red ink carries on as far as the eye can forecast. As the old adage goes, if something cannot go on, it will stop. Because unfortunately, there is no law in the world that says New Zealand cannot face a South American debt spiral. We're on a collision course with the IMF and bankruptcy unless we find the courage to change our spending habits. That is the second warning light on the dashboard. And these are the things I believe that the election will be or ought to be fought on. The third, and we look around the world for this one, people are falling out of love with democracy. And I don't believe democracy is in great danger here, but there are people here who find governments frustrating and unresponsive. If you look overseas, last year, autocratic countries overtook democratic countries for the first time in 50 years. Only 12% of the world's people now live in a liberal democratic society, the worst in 20 years. A strong democracy, well, that's the cornerstone of our identity. We're one of only 7 countries that have remained democratic for all of the last century. And while I don't believe we're in serious danger, I think we are subject to the same frustrations. People lose faith and trust in our institutions. They see government as so damn bureaucratic and unresponsive. And they ask themselves, for a tiny country, why is our government so big? Why is no one truly in charge of anything? And why do voters believe it doesn't work? Well, the answer becomes obvious with every frustrating announcement and lack of progress. That's the third big challenge this year of how do we get a government that actually responds and does the stuff people ask, because too many people feel it doesn't. And then there's a bigger question for our whole country, and that is, where is our positive, inclusive sense of who we are? This experiment of dividing ourselves into a treaty partnership between tangata whenua and tangata tiriti has been a disaster. The government telling people who were born here that they're actually guests, what right did they have to do that? And instead of being a country founded on ideas, where anyone can be a citizen if they follow the laws, well, instead they tried to make us a country based on identity rather than ideas, where you can only really be a true New Zealander if your ancestors settled first. That is wrong. And finally, the sum of this productivity slump and fiscal problem and government responsiveness and sense of identity is an entire generation feels let down. And when young New Zealanders look at their student loan, their wages, their taxes and the housing market, they can't make the numbers add up. Now, no one is saying that the boomers had it easy. Baby boomers worked hard for what they have, but they worked hard because hard work was a rewarding strategy. They had a fair deal. Put in the effort, your education will get you a career with rising wages, a house and a secure life. To too many young New Zealanders, that deal feels broken. And that's the people I mentioned voting with their feet. It's a great failing to fail at the expectations of your own citizens. But with falling real wages, an unsustainable fiscal picture, an unresponsive government, and no inclusive national story, can you blame someone for looking over the fence to check if the grass just might be greener? Many are prepared to give up their family, their friendships, and the connections they do have to New Zealand in order to find that brighter future. Which is always confusing me because the grass in Australia is brown, so I don't really see. But regardless, yes, we are, as a country, built on centuries of migration. Making brave voyages is in our DNA, but that same DNA can just as easily spirit people away if we don't get on top of these challenges. And that's why this country, this year, this election needs a party that will tell it like it is. ACT has proven time and again we're prepared to take on those hard issues and provide brave but constructive solutions. Through euthanasia, the Arms Act reforms, COVID-19, the methane targets, defining the treaty, we've taken on the issues others fear and we've put forward a constructive alternative. We're fearless and we tell it like it is. And so many times we've stood apart from the crowd only to be pilloried and lambasted, only to be proven right in the fullness of time, like so many of the examples I gave earlier. We've also shown that, given the chance, we can competently execute the changes. And this year, we're going to be taking on the very real challenges that New Zealanders feel, with serious solutions that can set up our country for success. And our solutions start with values required to break our country's slump. Our first value is equal rights for all citizens, so we can all feel like we're part of a country with a positive and inclusive identity. Our second value is positive sum thinking. It's not by birth that we achieve things, it's by creating. We believe that people have the ability to make a difference in their own lives, and instead of scapegoating some small group of New Zealanders, whether it's farmers or firearm owners or supermarket operators or landlords or bankers, there's always somebody being blamed for everyone else's problems. We need to stop it and start thinking positive sum. And at the heart of this initiative is a smaller, more efficient government that you can trust to deliver services for taxes you can actually afford. We need a story that is accurate and uplifting. We're not two peoples, tangata tiriti and tangata whenua. We are many peoples united by a common story. We're all settlers who've come in wave after wave to make a better life for ourselves and our children. And as a nation of settlers, we're not only united by a common story, we're united by a positive entrepreneurial story of adventurers and pioneers who are prepared to take risk for a better world. And this is the story of people who belong, but also can take on the challenges of a fast-changing world. It's a story that gives us positive sum thinking because we don't see wealth as something to divide up, but something to create. If we just wanted to fight over the scraps, then we and our ancestors wouldn't have risked everything to build a better life in a faraway land. We could have stayed in the countries and the places that we or our ancestors all came from. Instead, our pioneering spirit lives on today as Rocket Lab and Halter storm the world like Gallagher once did with Number 8 Wire. And we should celebrate that success, and we should denounce tall poppy syndrome. We should reject the endless blame game, because scapegoating one group after another, well, hasn't solved a single problem. We believe that most people, most of the time, are just trying to make the best of their time on earth, and we should start with that spirit. Then we still need to balance the books, raise wages, and restore faith in our democracy. If reaching all that was easy, we'd all be still enjoying Valentine's weekend. We wouldn't have to be here. But we're here because the most powerful choice we have is to demand a smaller, more efficient government. The ACT Party's shown that we can move the dial in that direction by cutting waste and red tape, making the departments that our ministers control deliver for the people they serve. The truth, though, is that we are still overgoverned. The question on so many people's lips, if you give it a moment's thought, is why does such a small country have such a large government? Take Norway, similar size, 20 ministers, 17 coherent ministries, each clearly aligned to a broad policy domain. Here in New Zealand, the whole structure is set up to preserve itself with everybody and nobody accountable. Why are there barely fewer bureaucrats than when we started trying to cut the numbers 2 years ago? Because it's like one of those anemones that you touch. If you've ever been scuba diving, you touch it and it sort of comes out and fights back and envelops you. Very, very dangerous thing, the public service. Because it's set up at the highest level in the copper dome at the top of the beehive to ensure that nobody is quite in charge of anything. We have 28 ministers and 2 undersecretaries governing 41 departments. There's one department, MB, which answers to 23 different ministers. I'm actually one of the very few ministers that's not theoretically in charge of part of MB. Some ministers have 7 different departments, part of which answers to them. Nobody is given sole responsibility for getting a set of outcomes for a budget. It's incredible when you think about it. Then there are ministers who sit in cabinet, and a further 8, who sit outside cabinet. They don't actually go to the cabinet meetings. If you described any normal company and said, yeah, we've got a board of 28, but only 20 of them are actually invited to the board meetings, you say that's nuts. Actually happened. The Ministry for Regulation, meanwhile, has been trying to count the number of regulatory agencies in New Zealand. Last I heard, they had discovered 250 regulators for just over 5 million people, but they have given up. The Human Rights Commission has been trying to count the number of redress agencies that you can go to if you have a grievance. So think about the Ombudsman or the Police Complaints Authority or the Human Rights Commission itself. So far, Stephen Rainbow, the Human Rights Commissioner, tells me they've found approximately 50 different agencies you can go to if you have a problem in New Zealand. This is a tiny country, people. Why does it have such a huge government? Then there's also, just to add to the complexity, ministers who exist without any department at all. For example, the Labour Party, in its unending wisdom, I'm sure this will be a popular choice down here, appointed a minister for Auckland. Figure out why the Blues keep losing. Without any actual budget, department or responsibility. I call these vanity portfolios. And the net result of this crazy spaghetti of government is that all of these agencies suck up a third of the economy. So if you work for 3 hours, 1 of those hours is entirely for the government. And yet the results for all of that money are entirely unsatisfying. It's not just what you don't get, it's the regulatory activity and the interference that you do get that puts another layer of costs onto New Zealanders. We'll never balance the budget, raise wages or restore trust in democracy when government is so large and efficient and unaccountable to New Zealanders. And so this year, the ACT Party will be campaigning for a smaller, more efficient government. Now, thank you. I know that there will be people saying, but hang on a minute, you guys are in the government and you hold associate portfolios and you even created a ministry. And I say, yes, I know that, but we are doing something that maybe has never been done by a politician before. It's called learning from experience and changing your direction based on what you learn. And what I've learned from being in the centre of government for 2 years is that it cannot function the way it's set up. And while we remain committed to keeping it going until the election, we will be campaigning to set it up properly next time so it can achieve the objectives that we have aimed for. And what that will look like is no more than 20 ministers who all go to the meeting. No more than 30 departments, so that most ministers have only one. And this is really important, because if you think about it, if you are a civil servant who's been doing the job for 30 years, and you get a minister who's theoretically in charge of fragments of 7 other departments, who do you think is going to get across the detail and win the contest? Who's really going to be in charge here? It's like the old joke, Yes, Minister was not a comedy, it was a documentary. By having one minister taking on one department, it is a fair fight. And that's all we're asking for. There'll be no minister, no department answering to more than one minister, because at the moment the temptation to play them off against each other is too strong. And there'll be no minister with a portfolio that doesn't have a budget and a department and a set of objectives that they have to achieve. You actually take ministers away from being a PR exercise back to being a person who is accountable for getting results for the taxpayers' money. Reducing the number of ministers, well, sure, it will save money because you won't have to pay ministers' salaries and their staff and so on, and they won't have to fly around and go in limousines. That will save money, and I'm sure that will take people's attention. But really, what this is about is changing what it means to be a minister. No more vanity portfolios designed to appeal to a group of people. Just one minister, one department, one set of results, one objective to get value for money for the taxpayer. And having only one department, they'll stand a fighting chance of actually occasionally getting one over the bureaucrats. Now, the other thing about this idea, and the reason we're campaigning on it, is that it is an idea that is realistic and can, and I believe will happen. I first floated this idea in a speech to the Tauranga Business Chamber last May. And since then, the New Zealand Initiative think tank have issued a comprehensive report advocating a similar consolidation. The Public Service Commissioner has said that he would like to see a consolidation. And then the government has actually merged environment, housing, local government and transport into the aptly named MCERT ministry. This is an idea whose time has come, but ACT will be campaigning this year to make sure it happens completely. Now, it's easy when you go through all of this to forget that life is actually good in New Zealand. Yes, we have enormous challenges, nobody denies that. But compared with most times, most places in history, and even most places today, New Zealand is a success. And the ACT Party is an important part of that, and our ambition doesn't stop there. There is no reason why we shouldn't aim to be the most prosperous and free country in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm proud of what your ACT MPs are achieving in Wellington. We now have a competent government, and we're a collegial and effective part of it. But we also know that, like so many of our peer countries around the world, our long-term prognosis is one of decline. Our future depends on good management, but good management is not enough. We need the courage to take on hard issues and turn off those lights on the dashboard. Our party has the best track record of any party for telling it like it is and driving real change. And if we're going to make life affordable again, raise productivity, balance the budget, restore our faith in democracy, then we need to take 3 steps. There's that united and inclusive story about ourselves as pioneers and adventurers. And I've got great news. It actually is an accurate description of our history, but we just need to tell it. We need to stop reaching for easy fixes and finding a different group to blame each time there's a problem. There's only 5 million of us. If we want to solve our problems, we have to start from the basis that we're all in this together, and most people actually do want a better tomorrow. And the good news is that our pioneering history sets us up well to navigate a fast-changing world and find those smart fixes. And finally, we need a smaller, more efficient government that frees up people's time and money to provide them for themselves and their families, and that That starts in the little copper dome that sits atop the beehive. This year, we're going to see a long, hard campaign. It's going to be trying, but there is always a small group of people, restless and determined, setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of others. That is the only way that real change has ever been brought about. I want to thank you for being part of that restless, determined group who loves our country so much that they've come to a political meeting in the afterglow of Valentine's Day. With a few good ideas and a love for our country, we can discover a New Zealand strong and free with a proudly beating heart. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your support to come. Thank you.